Hello, everybody. This is Jeff Berlin. Hi. Thanks for listening to my very, very first podcast. See, I've joined the 21st century because I know that podcasts are a really big thing. And if it wasn't for Sarah Childress and John McCracken, I'd still be on Facebook telling everybody that a metronome doesn't wake. You know, that people find that, a little controversial. Tell them that metronomes don't work. So I guess that the controversial element is must continue because I clearly have, I would say, fairly sturdy beliefs about music and how to learn it and how to play it. Actually, I take that back. Not how to play it. I really have more beliefs about how to learn it because playing is so personal. You know, I'm talking to Sarah, by the way, as I talk to you.
Yeah, hey everybody.
This is Sarah Childress, who many of you know if you signed up to Jeff Berlin Bass Education on Facebook. Sarah is the charming young lady who has been in touch with you and trying to provide you with the lessons that I have written and made available to bass players that want to learn how to play better. And Sarah is the brains behind the operation, the brains and the beauty. I mean, I'm the beauty too. You can't see it, but
You have a face made for radio.
I have a face made for. I have a face made that a radio was sitting on it. So, anyway, being here and having this chance to chat fits, I think, my personality in that I'm a fairly good communicator, I think, and I like to. When I do clinics or if I meet bass players or musicians that are asking me, so what do I practice? What do I do? How do I learn how to play better? I'm fairly good at sort of in-time discussion about principles of learning that I feel not only make sense, but are validated by history.
That's true, though since we're actually doing a podcast today, which isn't in the moment and in time, one of the things to think about is topics of conversation that we can share with people that will help them as part of their educational process. And so for this introductory podcast, the very first one, since we just this week let out into the world packages 1 and 2 for Jeff Berlin Bass Education. And now we're starting to have people interact with them. This seemed like the perfect opportunity to sort of pull the curtain back,
Yes.
especially as we're continuing work on 3, 4, and 5, which, by the way, should be available on or before December 1st.
Okay.
But now is a great opportunity to sort of pull back the curtain and really explore not only what Jeff Berlin Bass Education is all about, but also to get, how did we get here? So thinking about, what brought you to this point, what made you sort of... not only the incredible performer you are, but also the incredible sort of pedagogue, because you're a really talented teacher. So you designed this course. This is a course that has a very specific design. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 packages. They all add up to a full-blown course. Each package is designed with a very particular beginning, middle, and end.
Right.
It's very progressive. So if you could maybe talk a little bit about your own background and experience, and then how you've integrated that into your design of this course.
Oh, sure. That's a marvelous introduction to, I would say, my interests in this area. My particular background, and some people know this, some may not, is that I'm 64 years old. I'll be 65 in January. And I began my musical life at 5 years old on violin because my parents heard me singing, imitating my father, singing Italian opera.
Because since he was an opera singer.
He was an opera singer, and he would sing in the house, and I would imitate him. I can still remember one of the things I sang as a child. Isn't that funny? It popped into my head. Si tra I ceppi aleri tolte la mia feri splenderà. And I could keep going. I remember this aria, and I did it at 2 years old. Oh, Jeff's a genius. I was. Jewish parents just love
prodigy,
to say,
Mozart.
yeah, our kids are prodigies and geniuses. So they started me on violin, and from day one, lesson one, as I would say fairly much recently out of infancy, I was given a violin, and instantly from day one, a book was opened in front of me, and the very first note that I ever read in music in my life was presented to me. It was a G below middle C. And I grabbed my violin, and I kind of scratched the G, and the teacher told me to count 1, 2, 3, 4. And in a nutshell, if I could have read that G, I could read a Charlie Parker transcription. The principles, in a nutshell, again, podcast timing, are identically the same. If you read a G and identify it, you can identify a more involved elements of learning. So as I progressed in music on violin, then got into rock and became a self-taught bass player, which people might be interested to know, 100% of bass players, 100%, not 99.9, 100% of all of us that play the electric bass have a self-taught background. And some of us, including in that self-taught background, include academic musical training. And by noticing over the years that everybody that ever played a bass guitar were entirely trained, entirely capable in their playing via being a self-taught guy and a trained musician guy, when I speed fast forward, it occurred to me that electric bass, curriculum in the world is not organized, is not specific, it is jumbled, it is chaotic. Through no fault of anybody's, it's just simply that here's a modes course, here's a scales course, here's a course of Jamerson, here's a course of Jaco, here's learn gospel, learn this, learn that. And what I discovered is while the base educational system was looking for systems and methods to teach people, that I didn't see anything cohesive. How do you begin from day one, having maybe never read a note in your life, and becoming a capable reader, and thus becoming a capable player? Because reading denotes capable playing skills. It is, so I wrote this course.
Mm-hmm. Actually, though, if we can back it, because
Sure, sure.
I wanted to follow up on something that I haven't actually asked you before. Which is, okay, can you give me some specific examples drawing on your really long history of performing with some of the most incredible players ever, Alan Holdsworth, Bill Bruford, I mean, the list goes on and on. So how did you as a bass player, how did you integrate the academic background that you had and the self-taught paradigm, and how do you feel you personally both A, did that, and then B, benefited from it?
Well, I did it because it was taught to me. Every music teacher, and I've had quite a select group. I didn't have 20 teachers. I had 5. On the average, they all taught me music that didn't come out of the bass repertoire. The music I got was taught that were extracted from jazz principles, honed to specific principles, and assigned to me to write out, compose, and write out the exercises, and then play them on the bass. And because my training was such that I noticed that bass players didn't know how to play melodically and didn't know how to play, quite frankly, music off the bass. Everyone's very great at playing music on the bass, but when the bass goes down, many tend not to know how it works. So I thought if bass players who wish to improve would recognize that what they study is not what they play, it's what they study. There's 2 different principles. It's that I would design a course that starts from day 1, minute 1, note 1, and in the adult ability to read and study music could in 6 months or less or more go through, let's say, the first package of reading, because I had about 100 etudes that I wrote for that. I just kept writing because I didn't want to, in package 1, I didn't want to shortchange anybody. So it wasn't like, here's a page, next thing. I would write a page and then write 3, 4 more because I wanted to make sure that there was a goodly amount of information to get people to review a concept before moving to the next concept. And what I noticed is that my system exists in other areas of music, except it doesn't exist in bass. I noticed that there were systems for violin. I mean, I went through it for many years. There are systems for piano in quite a large degree. Oboe, I mean, not many people think of oboe, but the classical instruments are based in a system. They began here, the next step was B, next step was this, next step was that. And I couldn't find that anywhere in bass education, and fairly well consider bass education to be lacking in this area. That bass players who've tried many, many, many things still had difficulty in playing. And I couldn't figure out why until I recognized that a system wasn't in play. So I wrote a system.
So when you say difficulty in playing, what are you talking about?
Okay. All musicians hear music in their heads, all of us. Everybody that plays hears music that we've heard or music that we hear, our own. There is music in us that is difficult to represent on a bass guitar because people, as much as they hear the music, don't always know where to put their fingers on the neck to play the music. So it's a stumbling experience. It's a sloppy, well, that's not it. Well, here it is. That's the note. I go up in the neck. Where is that note? I can hear the song, but I can't find the notes. The inability to play is reflected in the fact that bass players who hear music can't play what they hear. And I'm referring to a large group. Of course, I'm not referring to everybody, but a large enough group of very interested bass players who want to learn how to improve hadn't had the system or the musical academic material to teach them only, and this is a word I would capitalize if I were on Facebook or something like that now, to teach them only what the notes are in a harmonic principle, and they're learning to read it and decide where they are on the neck. There's a whole big thing, and people know that I have a little problem with the overemphasis on groove, feel, art, heart, clicks, metronomes. That's why I teased about metronomes earlier. Emotion, dynamics, playing rock, locking with drummers.
Sure.
And before all of these things, by the way, almost all entirely, can be attributable to time in a self-taught experience because the self-taught rockers are 100%. Nobody goes to school to learn how to rock. And you can kind of go to the rock history and look at the names and see that nobody does this. Rock players learn on their own. So not playing their ideas showed me that a system had to be designed where if they saw a C, a D, and an E that are written on a page, something was happening far more profound and important than the mere notes. Here's what's happening. Your eyes identify a note. Your brain, in collusion with the eyes, see the note, register what it is, and then you have to use your hand, which is a physical representation of what your eyes and brain have registered, to then take an instrument, which is a secondary device. Everybody hears music, but it's hard to play it. Play where that note is, and then find a way to execute it so the note comes out cleanly. It is a 4 or 5 step principle of unified mind, eye, physique, and instrument to identify a simple C and play it on a bass note. If bass players did this every day for 3 to 6 months, and when you consider the repertoire that's in the world today, the musical repertoire that's mostly, I'm not talking about the Hadrian Farad genius, brilliant, astonishing, gifted bass players, which is a whole other thing, but the general repertoire of music that people generally tend to play, that if people would associate this experience by reading a few notes and going to the next lesson and the next lesson, they are going to synchronize and grow synapses in the mind. That's why we speak English, because our brains have grown synapses to store English information over many years. If bass players do this, they'll triple, quadruple their playing, and they will never, ever, ever have a problem ever again in their musical lives to represent what's in their minds or what they're asked to play.
Yeah, because I was going to follow up on the list that you're talking about with grooving and locking, etc. And one of the things that I noticed wasn't on that list was improvisation.
Shall I talk about that?
Yes, please.
Improvisation requires knowing what to improvise on. Improvisation is a harder road because improvisation is create. Create now. Create instantly. 1, 2, 3, do something you don't do. Which actually is a little bit of a falsehood, because if you listen to Chick Corea and you hear him play, you hear a style, because he's repeated those lines more or less, those ideas more or less for many years, which are redone and revisited. But improvisation is the creation of something from nothing. But that can't be done. You can't create from nothing a conversation in Swahili until I know what the Swahilian words are. And that simple principle it's difficult for bass players to grasp that. But before I'll check another language, before I can speak Mandarin or Cantonese Chinese, I have to know what the words are. And then improvisation of it, let's do it in English. we can improvise now. The sky is blue and I'm looking at you. And what would you say back as an improvise?
Bada bing, bada boo.
Bada bing, bada boom, man. I'm a bass player in this room. So I'm improvising, and you and I shared a little improv. But can we do it now in Czech?
Definitely not, having just watched a Czech film. No.
Okay, we can't do it. And if bass players would recognize that they talk about the language of music is what makes up the words of music. And the words of music are notes. It isn't merely the language that we heard from childhood or that we hear as an adult, or it's partially that, I suppose. But the language of music is like the language of English. And the language of English is made up of grammatical and non-artistically centered terms called verbs, pronouns, nouns, adjectives, past participles.
Easy for you to say.
Easy for me. Past freaking things, what I can't remember them right now. Past participles.
Popsicles.
And popsicles. There's improvisation.
Improvisation.
Now improvise popsicles in Svendi. You can't do it.
Nine, yeah.
Nine ist. So that's what the language of music is. It's notes. That's what it is. Notes are first, notes are primary, and notes are so obviously first. Obviously first, that anybody with eyes who sees can see it. Look at a bass guitar. What's one of the most obvious points of construction on a bass? It's a bass neck where the neck is divided up by fret spaces with either fretless or metallic frets representing notes. The very first reason that a bass guitar was built is not to play the blues, not to groove. It's to play a note. That's the basement truth of a bass guitar. It's to play a note. It's not to be an artist. It's not. In fact, no instrument was written. A piano wasn't written to play Beethoven or Bach. A piano was written to play music that was based in half-step, whole-step principles. That is simply easy to see. If bass players grasp this, there'll be a whole change in bass education. And that's why I wrote up this program, because I'm proud. I honestly believe, it's my opinion, that my program is the best electric bass program in the world, because I have based the construction of it according to my memory of starting from nothing and becoming capable. And because I'm so well trained in music, as other guys are too, of course, that I discovered that if I could learn a G, then I could learn a G and an A. Then I could learn a G and an A and a B. And in, let's say, 1 week or 2 weeks, I've doubled my ability to read a music. You do this in a month and I'm playing ba-ba-da-do-do-do-do-do-do. And it is the increase, as I said earlier, the mind-hand sequence. It doesn't fail. It can't fail. Do push-ups. You're going to get strong. You can't stop it. Go on a diet. You're going to lose weight. You can't stop it. Practice reading music. You're going to improve as a bass player. You can't stop it.
Gotcha. So now, if I've primarily been a self-taught bass player, how do I know that I need this program?
Well, that's a personal choice. A lot of bass players, and I respect their points of view. I read them on Facebook. I'm not interested in learning. I just like having a bass and having fun. How do you know? Actually, I can't answer that. If anybody doesn't, let's say, like referring back to an earlier point, if people don't, if people hear music and can't represent it on an instrument, it's a perfect sign that it's time to do something. If I have something to communicate in English and I can't do it, that's a perfect sign that I'm lacking in English terminology. I'd better up my understanding of the words, that's all. If I am fixing a wall socket in the house and I notice that I don't know what the red wire compared to the white or blue wire are, it's an indication that there's something lacking in my understanding. So anybody that plays a bass who finds that they're not presenting a cohesive statement or an understanding of what the notes are that they're thinking or are asked to play, it's a perfect signal that they need to learn more about the language of music, which are the notes. And again, I'll emphasize this. I'll start off by saying I lament and have always lamented the belief system in bass education that learning music somehow is a detriment to artistic expression. It is one of the greatest myths that has ever existed. in music. You cannot dumb down your artistic heart by upping your academic understanding and ability to play.
So now, for the people who have purchased the packages that we have now, 1 and 2, first of all, is there any sort of things that you'd like to tell them to sort of look out for? So, for example, we were talking earlier today about for example, lesson 1 in the beginner package has 1, 3, and 5, or 0 underneath. It was basically the fingerings for, and you said that about the 4th or 5th one, you decided to drop those.
The
Do you want to
fingering
say,
elements.
yeah? Do you want to say a little bit about that, just so the guys know what they have, what they're going to see, an encounter?
Okay. I would first emphasize that it would be very to their advantage, to people's advantage, if they do not look at this as an artistic experience they are about to enter into. There is nothing really, at the outset, certainly, artistic about going la 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 la. There's nothing artistic about it. What it is and what they should look for is at the very, very beginning, they'll see it's 3 notes on an E string. The very first note will be the E, and I put a 0 there underneath it to emphasize that it's an open E. The next note, I believe, is an F, and now I put a 1, so that's clearly the first finger in the first fret. And then the next note is a G, where I put the 3, which is the 3rd finger, and then the G in the 3rd fret. What these things are doing is like, that game where you rub your head and tap your tummy,
Yes.
and then rub your tummy and tap your head? Bass players are going to, who have not read, are going to experience a great shorting out. You guys are going to have misfires as your brain. What's that movie? Fantastic Planet.
Oh.
What was that? The one with
Yeah,
Leslie
based on
Nielsen.
Oh yeah, based on the Tempest. That's
Based
a
on
great
the
one.
Tempest.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the robot was taught, not to kill anybody. And if he's giving an order, he gets locked into this sort of burnout phase where his brain is fizzing and sizzling as he's trying to deal with the command that was constructed to obey versus his internal order not to harm a living creature. When bass player, I love that example. When bass player, I got to that. Wait a minute, I'm going to get next to, Son of Flubber. There's another good thing in that, right, John? So that's another good example. When bass players start reading, they're going to get that same brain burn. It's going to be a stutter. It's going to be a hand unsuredness. Your hand is going to maybe jump a little bit. You're not going to be sure where the note is. Your mind is going to be a little confused. Did I see the note correctly? Let me emphasize something. You cannot do this stuff wrong. What you are experiencing, what you will be experiencing, is literally the growing experience in reading music. You are beginning to identify a note and play it, and the reason your brain is misfiring, so to speak, is because it hasn't grown those synapses where the experience is so well earned that the synapse simply triggers when it's time. Anybody can grab a glass and go to the sink and get water. But if you take somebody, let's say, who may have had a stroke or something which is unfamiliar, I got a good one. If you're in a new town and you're driving your car and I tell you on the phone, go 8 blocks here, make a right turn, make a left turn, make a right turn, it's a misfiring of the mind. What did she say? How do I get there? Because it's not yet internal, mind-wise, it's not internalized. So as bass players, you're going to stutter. I call it the stutter. And when that happens, don't speed up, slow down. That's why I don't like metronomes, because metronomes are the priority instead of learning the notes. In our case, and I'm guaranteeing this, I'll put my career, my whole reputation is at stake, that if you count 1, 2, 3, 4, now what's the name of the next note? And you do it this slowly, just for a couple of minutes. You go nuts if you did it for hours. Oh, it's an F. Where's this F? Oh, here it is. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. And it's the out of time and repeated experience, because this will go shortly. Soon you won't even have to think about it. But one, you don't look for results. Remember when we were kids, or maybe as teenagers, we do push-ups and then run to the mirror to see if we had muscles? We want to make sure you girls really admired us. So I did it. I did push-ups and sucked my gut in. Well, now I have to suck my gut in. It's the same sort of, why did I say that? I had no reason for saying that. Oh, I remember the push-ups. Yeah. I remember now. I'm not hitting on you because
This is definitely behind the scenes.
I guess so. See, Gabby, don't listen. So we did push-ups and look for results is what I was going to say. And in music, we'll play the bass and then look and see, did I learn anything? And the answer will be yes. Will I know it? No. When you do 5 push-ups, did something, the muscle tissue tear a little bit and it was a kind of a little benefit? Absolutely. Will I see the benefit? No. You won't see the benefit. Don't look for it. Do it. Simon says, pick up the bass and tap your foot or count 1, 2, 3, 4 and read the music. Simon says, repeat the first line. I mean, I have a lot of etudes. You don't have to do them all. Just do 4 lines today. You know, you have 2 years to do this stuff. You don't have to do this stuff right away. There's no deadline on this stuff or the deadline to do it. But do it and do it every day and do it 4 lines, 6 lines. If you get a little punchy, put your bass down, get a coffee. Come back to it. If you don't practice up to the point of exhaustion or where your eyes are doing that sort of pinball wizard, you know, spin in your head, you're doing well. It's the review that will get you to learn this stuff, and it's the review that will get you to speed up. Don't look for results. They're coming.
And that actually makes me think of 2 comments that we've already had on folks, Toby Ellis and Klaus Bruckner, who are starting in on the packages, who have said that they've actually have found it so far to be a very meditative process. That actually once they get into it, and again, it's not only, you know, not being a slave to the metronome, but also I think not being a slave to expectations surrounding performance, because you're not performing for anyone. It's you, your bass, and the music, and just allowing yourself to inhabit that particular world and just be there, and be there on a regular basis. Because I know that's
Every
something
day.
else that we were talking about earlier. It is about sort of doing it every day, and it doesn't mean doing it for hours every day. It just means, you know, having the time, taking the time for yourself, and seeing it as time for yourself.
Yeah, it's the repetitiveness that gets us better. I mean, great athletes, you know, do exercise every day, and the more that they do, the stronger they get, where they can do more. How's that? And that's a great analogy. Start out simply, and as you slowly get accustomed to the lesson you're playing, you'll find that it'll go easier and easier and easier. That's what learning is about. And if it didn't happen that way, I wouldn't have done it. I never would have done anything that was going to cause me anxiety and emotional and, you know, anguish. I mean, that's not what learning is about. And I really object to, let's say, any teacher and a principal that learning music is not a priority, because it is. It gives reason for the function of the bass. And as I said, you're self-taught. You learn like Jimi Hendrix did. Then you learn academic music, and then you can learn a little bit like Jack Bruce did or John Patitucci did. I mean, there's academic benefits if you learn musical content. So, and it's not supposed to hurt. It's not supposed to be painful. So bass players who run into difficulties, I want to hear from you so I can possibly guide you or give you a little bit of insight.
One of the questions that I was going to ask too, because I thought it was really, you know, when you were saying once the lesson becomes easy, you know to move on. So I'm guessing that package 1 is a little different from package 2, because package 1, which is beginner to intermediate, which really, when you go from 1 to 24, it's like, holy moly. Just even watching you do when you get into 8th notes and 16th notes, it's like, oh my God, just look at your pinky. Like, how can you do that?
I got a great pinky.
You got a great pinky, guys. He does have a great pinky. I got to tell you, but you probably know that already. But
My
anyway,
pinky is very famous in bass.
as it should be. But so it seems like package 1 is very progressive. So I'm moving from lesson 1 through to 24.
It's
so
sequential.
It's very sequential. So how do I know when I'm ready to move on? And can I skip around, or should I take it sequentially to be progressive, or is there some flexibility within that?
There's flexibility if somebody has a capability to enter into a certain lesson that they find challenging enough where that's where they would begin. A lot of guys I wrote this for beginners. I didn't write this for capable players. I wrote this for total, complete beginners feeling.
Or let's say capable readers.
Capable readers.
Yes. So beginning readers.
Well, the capable readers could start in the middle or a little bit back, and definitely extract certain elements. But I wrote this for non-readers because I felt it wasn't a system for them. So I started this out as non-readers, and generally I would suggest not to hop around, But let's say you did. It's no harm. I mean, you're
We're
reading.
not watching. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not watching. Although I know where you all live. So I would certainly suggest start from the beginning and read it. And now I've written a lot of etudes for each package. Maybe you've done in the first etude or the second and you're done, let's say. I mean, I can't say you have to do every single etude in every single package, although I will recommend it for the first 5. For the first 5 or so lessons, everything should be read. Everything should be read. And then as you start going in, you'll see I'm repeating the same ideas possibly, and you say, well, I got this. Although I would still say, read it. It can't hurt. It might even reinforce the fact, well, gee whiz, I got this. If you feel a little bored and you're doing very well with it, that's a good signal. You're better than you were maybe 2 weeks ago.
That's great. So now, does package 2 work in the same way?
Kind of. Similar. It's a similar principled package based on all the different keys in music and based in major. So that package is all major 7s in C, F, B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, G flat, and C flat. And the reason I wrote them there is because they exist, not because of gigs, not because of art. I do not regard these things in learning. I'm one of the, maybe I tend to believe the only guy who recognizes that playing is an instantaneous reproducing of information we've already learned. And learning is a regard and or review of music that we're trying to figure out. The two experiences don't relate. So that's why I wrote C flat and G flat, because they exist. They're academically meaningful. You never have to look at it again, but it requires a brain, eye, music, bass, hands, sequencing, and there's no better way to learn. So those things are also, what did I say? I did the flat keys: C, G, D, A, E, B, F sharp, and C sharp. And I did etudes very simply. Then I did etudes more complicated with with flats or sharps. And then I did the same exact etude with a key signature. So you're reading the 2 etudes, but one has a key signature and the other one doesn't. So you're looking at sharps or flats, or now you're looking at a key signature piece which has no sharps or flats written in the notes. So, and I go through all the different sharp and flat keys. That is academically meaningful, solid. These are really challenging etudes in certain regards. So you do 1 bar. 1 bar.
Okay.
Get comfortable with 1 bar. Go to 1 bar and 2 bars. Like I say, you could do this stuff for the next 2 years. There's no deadline in learning, but it will make you better if you do it the way I suggest.
So, since we're next week actually going to start doing the video demonstrations for packages 3, 4, and 5, why don't we give the guys a preview of what's coming? So let's take them package by package.
Okay.
So, what's up next with package 3?
Package 3 deals in scales. Now, I'm not an entirely huge fan of scales in that they're usually regarded as up and down, da 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 da. You know, so what I did is I took these scales and made etudes out of them to make them harmonically more meaningful. People have to read them to see what I'm talking about. But I think there's 14 different lessons in package 3, and should I read out the scale names? Okay, I did etudes in. Now check this out; it's really a lot. Major 7 sharp 11 etudes. C minor 7, but that's based in Dorian. C minor 7 based in Phrygian. C minor 7 based in Aeolian. Now, people that are talking about interest in the modes, these things are the modes. I think that these are full written modal etudes. I mean, it's quite unique. I did C minor major 7 etudes, harmonic minor etudes, minor 7 flat 5 etudes with a natural 9. Isn't that cool? A C minor 7 flat 5 etude with a flat 9. I did Mixolydian, a dominant 7 Mixolydian, dominant 7 sharp 11 etudes, C7 altered etudes. I mean, check this out. It's a complete course in any university. A diminished etudes package, diminished scale etudes I remember that's diminished etudes, which is a whole step, half step, and then I did one that's half step, whole step. Cool. And finally, I did major 7 sharp 5. And I mean, these things are more complete, I think, than you can find at any school on earth. And I wanted it to be scale, modal, harmonic, etude oriented, and totally 100% academic. So if these things seem complicated, and intermediate and good players can take a big bite out of this, and hopefully the reading etude, the reading package prepares one to go into package 2, and then following package 3. The notes are known. The notes will be available. They won't be a mystery to people. So package 3 has all these scales written out in etude form, song form.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So I know in 4, which you actually have or you're still in the process of revising, but you'll be done soon.
I'll be done today.
Okay, good. I'm just putting the pressure on them, guys. Don't worry about it.
That's okay.
So it's chord tones, right? So
it is, and I'm a reviewer. I don't like necessarily writing something and calling it a day. Mm-hmm. I'll write something, give it a couple of days, go back, and as if by magic, and it's always been like this with me, my glaring mistakes are evident. I can see them really clearly. So what happened is of course I didn't invent chord tones, but I'm the guy, and I'm proud of this, that brought attention to bass players that chord tones exist. I'm the guy that sort of publicized it, wrote exercises about it, kind of made it known. And when I looked at my exercises, I said, these are not worthy of what I think a well-done chord tone exercise should be. So about less than a week ago or so, I went into a mad redo. And I only have one page. I know what it's going to do, so I'm not even worried about it. And I'll be done rewriting the entire 4th package, which is a chord tone package. And I did it so that people will have, as far as I'm concerned, my very, very best effort to give them the best chord tone lessons that I possibly could.
But that's interesting. So you say you looked at it and you were like, no, I don't want this. Like, I want to redo it. So
right.
What didn't you like about the original, and how have you redone it to make it more satisfying to you?
Well, often I'll write something out in terms of an academic, and the first idea seems good. I look back and notice that harmonically or progressively, there isn't a sequence that I like. The line doesn't represent what I consider a meaningful harmonic and academic piece of music to regard. And it's just obvious.
Well, I get it, yeah, because I mean, as an educator myself, I'm constantly redoing my syllabus based on what I think the students will engage with most compellingly, and also that I think there's a particular logic in terms of where I want them to get to from when they start the semester and when they end the semester. So since I know that you're sort of the chord tone guy, so first of all, for me, for somebody who's not as familiar with chord tones, like where did you import them from? And secondly, how are you using them now to create an, as you say, an academically meaningful experience? And I'd love for you to actually define academically meaningful.
Academically meaningful means that there's a piece of music that is written to elevate our ability to play better. That's all that academic means to me. The chord tones were... okay, here I go. I admire bass players and their playing ability deeply. I love to listen to bass players, but I cannot abide the manner in which bass is taught. And from many, many years ago, when certain principles of bass were being propagated through the bass community, it was easy for me to notice what was being offered, to instantly know what to offer to counterpoint and make available another perspective of learning. Not to cause harm, not to be the antithetic bass colleague, but the lessons were so musically unjustifiable. And while, of course, bass players and teachers mean well, they're loving people. I've said this for years. They want to help. They care to help their students. They're doing their best. But the material doesn't support the intention, in my opinion. So when I'd see something, I'd say, I'm going to go another way. And what happened was the scales were sort of taught, in fact, still are. And scales always sort of seems to be an indication to me that there's a limit in terms of what somebody might teach, because a scale is a kind of a cliche of learning. La 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 la. And the idea that how do I apply this to my art? And as far as I can tell, no teacher ever told their students, you're not supposed to apply this stuff. It isn't meant for application. You don't play and practice, you don't practice in order to apply it to your playing. You practice in order to learn how to play the instrument better based in solid musical principles. That's it. They're different. So I came up with chord tones when I saw that bass players who wanted a solo didn't have the tools to represent harmony. And I recognize that the simplest form of harmony that exists in music literally is the root, the third, the fifth, and maybe the seventh. That's it. So, I mean, the national anthem is da, 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 da. I mean, chord tones, Beethoven, da, 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 da. You ever go to the racetrack? Da, 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 da. I mean, it is so pure that although it is not really a good choice for art, it's too vanilla. It's just too boringly vanilla. But it's a great choice for understanding, at least in its basic presentation, the meaning of a chord. If you can get to understand what a chord is, because a chord is the root source of what we play on. If you play on a Stevie Wonder song on Superstition, dun 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 dun. I don't know what key it's in, but maybe it's in G minor. And then the bridge, what does it go? D, E flat, D, E flat, D, D flat, C, D, da 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 da, dum bum bum bum. And these are the chords. Even the bass line to Superstition, except for the fourth, are chord tones.
Oh.
You know, bum 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 do bum ba da, are chord tones. So, what's that song? Baby, What I Say? The Ray Charles.
Yeah, Ray Charles. Oh,
Bum 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 ba dum bum bum bum. Chord tones. So there's artistic use, but you can see it's a little vanilla sometimes. So that's why I came up with the chord tones, and that's why I come up with things. Bass education tends to make it easy for me to see what is being offered. And again, I mean no harm. I'm not against people. I'm not against institutions. I'm not against so and so and such and such. I have a problem with methodologies, as one may have a problem with our government and our political system and how it functions, how one might have a problem with the sort of fast food elements instead of a more healthy food situation. Nobody's mad at Ray Kroc because he created McDonald's, but the fast food industry offering food that might not be healthy in its nature. That's what I do. But I think people find it unkind. It isn't meant to be unkind.
Well, it's sometimes tone. I mean, it's sometimes tone. It's just, it's this way in academia too. Different strokes, different folks. Different people have different ideas and different approaches.
They certainly do.
And their different ideas are what lead them to have different approaches. And it's just that you have different ideas and different approaches. And that's what we're offering right now is different approach based on your different ideas.
I will add that my approach isn't different, and I'll validate that here.
You tell.
In music history, people learned how to play their instrument and learned how to compose by one of two ways, what I mentioned earlier. Either they're self-taught, as certain ethnic musicians might be. In Africa, clearly they didn't have the harmonic system. It was another thing. It was a cultural creation of
another system. Just
another
based on,
system.
yes, different national and cultural values.
That's precisely right. In Japan, same thing. I mean, you go to South America, there's a lot of indigenous peoples who created their things, but in the Western musical canon, what existed was entirely and 100% training and practicing of musical content. And I'll use this word emphatically, period. There were no other systems that I'm aware of where anybody for 3 or 4 centuries had learned how to play or compose. Bach said, anybody can do what I do. I was just industrious, he said. I worked hard at my thing. He was being a little modest,
Sure.
of course, but his point also includes that I was industrious. What does that mean? He worked his butt off. He learned the facts of music that were available in the 17th century. Beethoven had 4 or 5 teachers, tops. Salieri, Neefe, who else did he have? Alfred Berger. There were 4, 5, 6 guys. And when Beethoven was writing his 3rd symphony, he went back to Salieri to learn how to write melody for voice. He wanted some input. So these people entirely and completely into the 20th century and into the 21st century, in most cases, only learned music. History validates the use of music. So if people have, everybody teaches differently, I'll agree to that. In my opinion, that's the problem. I teach this way, I teach that way, I teach this way. But history, and anyone could check this out, everybody learned in a manner that was not, I teach this way, I teach that way. This is called counterpoint. They called it figure bass. They called things counterpuntal writing. It were factual paradigms of music education. And it worked so well that 100% of the Western world's musical community, other than the self-taught guys, were trained in it. That's why I'm using this stuff, because guys, I'll teach this, I'll teach that. I realize that's true. But if you do it my way, which isn't my way in the slightest. Wouldn't that be funny if I said, well, my way that I created? They've been doing this for centuries. For centuries. There's nothing unique about it until bass players decided that music was not good enough and not worthy enough to be put first, and tell students that you do it this way. That's all there is to it. You don't have a choice. I don't go to medical school and say, well, I don't really want to learn about our arterial system. I want to learn about heart transplants. And but we do in bass. And so this is why I say my system, which is not my system in the slightest, is born on the fact that music cuts months and years off of wondering how to play and how to learn. It simply is that narrow, straight to the heart of it. I am industrious, said Bach, because his teacher said, you're going home and learning this. Beethoven had the same thing. Mozart had the same thing. I mean, they're geniuses, but geniuses learn the same way as we non-geniuses.
Sure.
You know? Or if, in my case, because I'm singular, I'm a genie. I'm a non-genii.
A genie.
I dream of non-genie.
Exactly.
So that's all. I just had to share that. There's loads of choices, but that doesn't make it right, and I don't abide by that, because I don't see law school, medical school, or air conditioning and repair, auto mechanics. I don't see optometry. I don't see how do you swim? Fairly well, everyone learned the same way, but hopefully you did it in the shallow end of the pool. Then you could swim and screw up and get up. Anyways, that's my belief. I hope it makes sense.
Okay. So, package 5, approach notes.
Okay, package 5 is approach notes.
Which consist of.
Okay.
I know you said that you were like, oh, approach notes. Those are going to be some tough ones. So you're going to have to practice a little bit before we start recording.
I have to work on these. I'll go for the simpler demonstrations. There's approach notes based on the same chords types that I did with the scale package in package 3. And it is, approach notes are notes that are below or above a chord tone.
Okay.
One might attribute this to jazz. Ba ba do ba do ba do do da. Includes. If it wasn't for that, it would be da do da do 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 da do do do. But I went da da do 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 da da ba da. And it's not meant to be a principle of learning that supports the use of jazz. It is meant to be a principle of learning that trains the eye, the written music, the hands, the instrument in a sequence of regarding music that is not natural, yet harmonically perfect for bass players to regard. That's how you get better. What anyone who kind of looks at this as jazz is, take one of the approach note lines, put on, go through a couple of big amps, put in a distortion pedal, and have your drummer play a hard rockin' 2 and 4, and play that bass line and see if anyone calls you a jazz musician. It's not entirely about in the art, the notes, but the presentation. That's why I don't associate art with learning. So the approach notes are notes from below and above the chord tones in different manners. Half step from above, or half step from below, whole step from above if it's scalular, 2 from below, 1 from above, 2 from above, 1 from below. And the variety, again, is academic. It's not usable per se. It's not transferable to the gig, because most gigs don't care about 2 passing tones from, or half steps passing tones from below and 1 from above. But as bass players, like I say, if you can get through these things, name me any gig or any music that you couldn't nail. This is supposed to heighten our ability as musicians so that when we do decide to play in the self-taught thing, it's 10 times easier. Talk about having the ability to play whatever you hear. So that's
This will
what.
do it.
Oh,
So now, and you have probably about 14 or 15 etudes and 4 and 5 as well?
Yeah, I think I have 15 and or 12 and 4, and maybe about 14 or so in 5. I honestly don't remember specifically, but each course has, again, a system. One to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, and the next, to the next, next, to the next, to the next, to the next, next. And they are systems to begin here and struggle a little bit and learn it and then continue on. And then I've done this for decades, and it's a beautiful thing. Charlie Banakis, who I have his picture hanging in my house,
Oh, that's great.
is widely regarded as maybe one of the greatest, if not the greatest jazz. I mean, him and Sandoli perhaps are regarded as the greatest jazz instructors in the 20th century. When people were going to Berkeley in the 70s and the 80s, they would go to Charlie and take lessons on the side. That's how great Charlie was. And Charlie knew me because I used to go see him. So, and he was a funny guy. Hey, Jeff, man, what's happening, Jeff? And Charlie would tell me the truth. Hey, Jeff, man, I heard you playing on that cassette. I sent him cassette tapes. Heard you playing on that cassette tape, man. Sounds great, man. You're killing, man. But you're playing too horizontal, man. I got to give you something to get you to play more vertical, man. And he was such a kind of a nerdy, goofy guy who was maybe the greatest genius of music education ever.
That's amazing.
You go through a Charlie Banakis course and your whole life has changed and different, period.
Incredible.
I know things, and Charlie Banakis alumni know things you can't learn anywhere else.
Sure.
That's why I'm passing a lot of this stuff on to people. I didn't invent any of this stuff. I invented a little bit of the material that you're using, but the principles are taught, and they work so well that everybody that learned them and practiced them became better players. Doesn't mean better career or better gigs or better, I got in a record deal. I find a great problem with anybody or school or out institution or a place that says study with us and you'll get a gig. You can't promise that type of a thing.
Yeah.
The music industry is a little bit on the wane in terms of sideman situations, and the really great guys who, let's say if they're interested in that, are guys that can give and offer a service in a minute. Studio and producers, they don't want to waste time with bass players hunting around for notes. They want a guy to come in, provide the bass part to their satisfaction, and go home. And that comes from learning music. And 1 year, if bass players dedicated 1 year, their whole lives would change. Because a lot of these guys that are listening to this are self-taught and have been playing bands and playing the music that they're playing for 15, 20 years. And have fairly well, and I think people might agree with this, kind of table-topped out. It's like a Dow Jones that got to 15,000 and then doesn't go any higher. And that is, I mean, if that's acceptable, of course people make a choice. It's not acceptable to me. And as a musician wishing to express my ideas, I need to know more about music to do it. So that's the nature of my system, to help bass players to get right to the heart of what it takes as an academic reading principles to learn how to play better. And I'm glad to have done the work to make something. I think it'll last forever until the sun goes supernova.
At least that long.
Wouldn't that be great if my system was still selling like 4 billion years
to
from
the
now?
cockroaches, yeah.
To the cockroaches that took over the
and the
planet?
dinosaurs and the ice caps, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the
So
thing.
one quick thing that when you were talking
All right, Sarah, that's about all I have today.
well, we've covered quite a lot. Actually, we thought we'd do a 20-minute podcast, and I think John said we've been talking for like 50 minutes.
That's amazing. Well, there's a lot to share in music, and there's a lot to share in learning. And, well, I want to thank everybody for being a part of this, listening to this. My wish, I'm speaking for Sarah here, I'm sure, is that our wish is that we're going to provide something that's unique, a real place to discuss music that we feel, that I feel, is based in solid principles that will help players to play better. And that's the goal. So thank you very much, everybody, for being here, and have a good day.
We'll catch you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Oh, that was kind of a weak bye.
Bye.